Hello everyone, and welcome to Seymour Duncan's online course on how to swap out your pickups in a Les Paul style guitar. If you've never swapped your pickups out before, this is an excellent course because we're going to cover everything from the tools and the equipment to each step along the way. In addition to the videos, you'll also get a PDF that you can reference that has more information as well as some diagrams and some photos that could help clarify a few things. Also, please check out our website. We have a lot of resources on our website, including our wiring diagrams. So if you go to our homepage and click resources, you'll see a link for wiring diagrams, which you can search for the specific diagram that matches your guitar, or if you're looking to do some different modifications to your instrument. Please check out our website for all that information. So now let's begin with the first part, which is the equipment and the tools that you need. First, let's cover some of the tools and supplies that we recommend. Now, some of these are going to be essential to be able to do your pickup swap, but others are less essential, so keep that in mind as we go through it. But regardless, all these are here to help you make this job much easier and cleaner, and also designed to help you protect your guitar along this process. So first thing that you really want to make sure that you have is some sort of protective eyewear. So if you don't wear glasses like myself, getting some safety glasses is really important, because there is that chance that some like solder or some other metal shards can fly off and land in your eye. So be careful. These are relatively inexpensive, and it'll definitely save a trip to the doctor. The main thing that you're going to be using is a soldering iron. So if you haven't checked out our course on how to solder, the type of iron that we recommend is something that's rated between 40 and 85 watts. We use these 85 watt welders here at Seymour Duncan on our production floor. This one actually has an adjustable temperature control. You don't need something that fancy. You just need something that's going to be able to heat up the element, especially something like the back of a potentiometer. The potentiometer is a big heat sink, so you'll need enough power to be able to melt the solder and be able to attach the ground wires to the back of the pot. So something that's rated for over 40 watts, preferably something closer to the 85 watts, is what we recommend. You'll definitely want to make sure that you have a good tip for that. We recommend the chisel tip. It's a good tip because it's big enough and wide enough to be able to deal with these larger heat sinks like the back of a potentiometer, like I mentioned before. It also makes just kind of working in general with guitar electronics much easier. If the tip of the iron is too thin, it can take a while for the element to heat up, and it'll be kind of frustrating, especially if you're new to this. Another thing that you'll need is a way to clean your iron, which we recommend a brass pad like this, or you can also get a sponge. They both work really well, but you'll definitely need something to help clean your soldering iron as you work through this project. And you also want to use 6040 tin lead rosin core solder. That's pretty readily available, and it works really great for guitar electronics. Most important is you're going to need a screwdriver that has either separate screwdrivers for Phillips and standard, or something like this kind of multi-tool where you have both of them on one screwdriver. So you'll never know what type of screws that your guitar has, or the mounting screws and things like that. So you'll definitely need something like that. Next is these kind of standard shop rulers. These are great because you can actually measure your pickup height before you take them out, especially if you like where your current pickups are set. You can measure it, and then when you put the new pickups in, you can then duplicate that exact pickup height. It's also can be used for other things like adjusting your action and things like that. So it's just a great tool to have, and they're relatively inexpensive. You're definitely going to need some wire strippers. So there's a lot of different types of lead wire gauges. So something that covers a relatively good wide range is going to be useful. In particular, like, you want to make sure that you have something that covers from the 22 to this one goes all the way to 32. So it all depends on the type of pickup that you're using, but having something like this that covers that range is going to be really helpful for you. You're definitely going to need some wire cutters, and both for cutting your strings off as well as cutting the wires themselves. And you want to make sure that these are designated to those specific activities. You do not want to use some wire cutters to cut the strings because it can damage it and it'll make the job much more difficult for you. So keep that in mind. So some heavy duty ones for strings and some of these nice kind of finer ones to do for cutting wires. Another thing that's it's more of a nice to have or non-essential tool, but if you're new to this, having some helping hands can really make it much easier, because you can use this to hold the wires so you can tin them and or hold the wires in place. So as you start to build your skill, you probably will use this less and less, but nonetheless it's a really, really nice thing to have in your toolkit, and they're relatively inexpensive. Painter's tape. This is really, really helpful because you can use it to label things. You can use it to protect certain aspects of your guitar. We're going to be using it to tape down some of the hardware so it doesn't fall out, so when we turn the guitar over, so everything stays in its perfect position. So it's really nice to have some of this, very useful to have in your toolbox. Another it's kind of a nice to have item, which is some shrink tubing. This is great because if you bought some 4-conductor wire and you're just going to be hooking up kind of more of a standard wiring, this is good because it can actually protect some of the wires that are in the cavity of your guitar. It also can be useful, like if you have a single conductor, sometimes that braid, if it's really long and it's wrapping around certain components, you can use longer pieces to be able to shield that and connect it so it's not grounding out to anything in your guitar cavity. This is another kind of non-essential, but it's really nice to have, which is just a brush. This is great because I like to brush off the working area or the mat that I'm working on. Keeps any sort of kind of chunks that could potentially scratch the guitar off. It can also be used to kind of clean off and dust off some of the hard to reach areas in your guitar. So it's kind of a nice to have there. Again, these things are relatively inexpensive. Another thing I would say it's definitely an essential item, which is having some kind of shop rags or some cloths. And just like with the cutters, you definitely want to use these for their specific jobs. Meaning, if you're going to be using one rag to protect your guitar while you're working, while you're soldering the wires together or doing any kind of electrical work, it's important to not use this to clean your guitar, because solder can drop on this, can actually scratch the finish on your guitar if you use the same rag. So it's good to have something kind of separate for polishing versus protecting your instrument. Since you're going to be taking a lot of things off on your guitar, you may want to grab some guitar polish. It's a great opportunity to be able to polish your guitar. You'll obviously want to get some strings. No reason to keep the old strings in this install. Makes things much easier to take off the strings so you can get to everything that you need. This is also kind of a non-essential, but highly recommend is a meter, multimeter. This is nice because once you've wired everything up, if there is an issue or if you need to check something, making sure that the output is reading correctly, a multimeter will help you do that. And you're going to see later that how useful this is when we install these pickups. You don't have to have one of these, and you have to be very careful using an electric screwdriver, because these tend to be, they have some weight behind it, so it's easy for it to slip off the screw, and you can easily scratch your guitar. So you want to be very, very careful when you're using one of these. Also, when you're screwing this, these things can have a lot of torque, so it's really easy to strip things. So just be really careful. People definitely use them, but it can be, you have to kind of use your own discretion when you're using something like that. As I mentioned earlier, this mat here is really nice. This is designed for guitar. It's a good size. And it just works really well. It comes with this headrest here for your guitar. It's not essential, but it's nice to be able to have something for your guitar so it doesn't get scratched and everything stays nice and safe as you go through this. Another really nice thing to have is some type of tray or kind of container for any parts that you're removing from the guitar. And it's just a great way to kind of keep things organized and a place to put them as you remove them so they don't end up on the mat here. because you'll be turning your guitar over, and if there's some type of screw or something that's left on the mat, there's a chance you can scratch your guitar. So this just helps keep things organized. I use some painter's tape on here on these old boxes, pickup boxes, and I labeled them. And you don't have to label them, but something to keep things nice and organized and separated would be really, really beneficial for you. Keep things nice and safe and in the same place. Now that we've talked about some of the tools and supplies that you'll need, let's go on to the next part, which we're actually going to take a look at the guitar, and we're going to start to remove some of the parts like the strings and the back plate so we can actually do the pickup install.